So it's very important to recognize what's going on in your community, especially if you're a parent. You may not be aware of the reforms when they hit. Luckily, I was aware of the reforms, so I was able to pay attention to how they were using data to drive parents away from the traditional schools into the charter schools. They would say things like, well, 50% of New Orleans parents are choosing charter schools. What they didn't tell you is we didn't have a choice of any other schools. After Katrina, most of our schools were damaged. The neighborhood schools were pretty much all shut down, and as they rebuilt schools, parents didn't have a right to go to a neighborhood school. You had to apply to go somewhere else. I lived 2 blocks from a school that I helped to rebuild after Katrina, understanding that my son would be going to high school. So 3 years before he would go to high school, I fought hard to rebuild my community and rebuild the school as a seat in that community, only to find that my child couldn't go to that school. Today he stands on a corner in front of that school to take a bus to go 11 miles away to go to a different school. So they don't tell you that. They also overhype the success in New Orleans. There's a particular school in New Orleans that just graduated its first graduating class. It's a new charter school. Oprah gave that charter school $1 million. But what they don't tell you is that that school started with 83 students as its freshman class. Well, they graduated 55 students. Where did the other 40% go? What's the performance level of those who stayed versus those who left? They don't tell you that. They tell you that 90% of our seniors are going to college. But they don't tell you that the average ACT for many of these schools are somewhere between 16 and 19, which won't get you into a 4-year college. So they trick parents with data. They have advertisements all over the city touting all the great things they're doing at the school. But when parents apply to these schools, they find that they're simply test prep factories, and that their children will be asked to walk on a line, and if you step off the line, that you get demerits. Their parents find that they're called for every little thing. So what we have is parents say, wait, this is not what they advertise, this is not what I want. They tell us, well, you have free choice, you can choose another school. Sadly, most of the parents I work directly with, since Katrina, almost 7 years ago now, those kids have been in 4 and 5 different schools, and they're still in elementary school. Now, most people tell you that there's learning loss that happens when a child switches from one school to the next. Imagine the amount of learning loss that's happening to children in New Orleans who came back to a chaotic neighborhood, don't have neighborhood schools to go back to, those same teachers to go back to because they fired them all. There's chaos at home because you're in the middle of a renovation project trying to rebuild your home, if you have a home to go back to, because they did tear down 4 of the major housing developments, so some of those kids don't even have homes to go back to. They're living on top of other relatives. But, you know, so the learning loss, and you're switching schools, there's not going to be a good outcome to that. Children are not able to form those good those peer relationships. And we're supposed to believe miraculously, because of all of the reforms in New Orleans, there are unprecedented gains. It's not logical, and it's not the reality in New Orleans. So what I decided I needed to do was to start spreading the word. I do a lot of work educating parents about the truth. I pour through the data, and the data the state puts out. And I help parents to see the big picture. I help the community to see the big picture. I started a blog. It's called EduTalk NOLA, EDUTALK NOLA.com. I work with other people in the community, other educators and community groups, so that our voices are amplified as we try to tell the truth about what's happening in the New Orleans school reform. New Orleans is not a model to be replicated. And we are relentless. The team of parents and community members and teachers who are involved in telling the truth, we are relentless. We let everybody know what's going on. And we definitely need to engage all of you here and letting the world know that New Orleans is not a model. Recently, Senator Mary Landrieu had a hearing before the Senate Health Committee, and they presented a book called New Orleans Education Reform, a Model for Cities. Well, we found out about it 2 days before, and we sent 2 parents up there, and they basically crashed that session and began to tell the truth about what was going on in New Orleans. So what this means is everybody has to get involved in this fight. We need everybody, whether you have children in public schools or not, because schools are the bedrock of our society. Public schools are important for the continuation of our democracy. And if we let our public schools be privatized the way that they're trying to privatize our schools, we won't recognize the country we live in.
How do I follow that? Well, I'll say 2 things that the teacher data reports have done very well for the teaching community. Number 1, it's given us, those of us who are well versed in math, a platform to talk about education reform. Besides myself, I know Karran Rubenstein, for example, has done a tremendous job of taking apart teacher data reports and demonstrating to the public just how deleterious they have been for the general public. And 2, it's galvanized teachers around the idea that in order to ensure that there's a survival of our profession, that they have to remain active somehow, in some way. I think teachers have started to finally target the right people when it comes to their criticisms. It's no longer teachers are quote unquote complaining or whining, it's teachers are getting active. And that's a very critical part of this real reform, or in my terms, revolution. Thank you. I mean, the thing is, teachers are now starting to see that they need to build a broader base. So it's not just us anymore. It's us with students and parents and allies and anybody else who would like to help us build better schools. That's such a critical piece of this thing. Just recently, for example, I know that there were parents who were informed about a field test that was happening because Pearson wanted it to happen. Not for anything else, they just wanted it to happen. And sure enough, there were parents and students in front of the Pearson offices revolting against what was happening. And they did not have a nice lunch that day, I assure you. Now, the hope right now really is that teachers now are starting to see that education is political, but now more than ever. And not just in a strike sort of sense. It's more like a, let's use our power as a voting bloc, as a union, as people who are invested in our children's future sort of way. That's such a critical piece of this. And no longer can we just lock up our classrooms anymore. We have to start seeing our schools as community-based organizations. As you can tell from what Karran was telling you all, there's ways in which people are trying to get schools to just be their own isolated places. If you can get the students all around that school to not go to that very school and put them somewhere else, then you can destroy that whole community, that whole neighborhood. So we need to start making sure that our hubs, our places, our intellectual spaces are more receptive to the community. It's no longer about just test scores, it's about making better people. And that's what I think education can do. I mean, just we need to wrap it up. We need to start investing in making better schools and making sure that our politics are aligned with making that happen for our